And hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pumpkin Copter Cast, the only video game show. So today I'm joined by one of the people behind one of the latest indie gems to hit the internet in the face, Thor of Pirate Software, the studio behind Heartbound.
Hey, what's up?
Nothing much. So we'll start with like the introductions, the who you are and your role in Heartbound.
Sure. So my name is Thor. I used to work in AAA, so I've been in the gaming industry for about 10 years. And I quit to go make indie games. And I built this team of 3 people. So Stein von Wakeren does all of our music and sound effects. Shay does all of the art and animation. And I do all the programming, writing, and game design. So anything that you see in the game is drawn by Shay and then placed by me. And anything you hear in the game is composed by Stein and then placed by me.
Okay then, so how were you introduced to games?
Oh man, when I was a kid, I used to have a Super Nintendo, and I used to put the blanket over the old garbage TV that we had, and then like hide under it late at night, and then play video games on the Super Nintendo. And hope that my parents could hear. But of course they could. Of course they could. I got in trouble for it all the time. But that's kind of like my first introduction to games. Was just like I could leave the real world and go off into fantasy land and do that, and I would stay up all night playing games. It was ridiculous. I still stay up all night playing games, but now I'm an adult and I'm allowed to.
And what would you say is your favorite game and or games growing up?
I would have to say Earthbound, Chrono Trigger, and Secret Mana. Earthbound, I love the really dark story with it, with the like overtones of just like super happy, super ridiculous humor, but really intense concepts that were happening in that game. You fight a god when it's a baby and kill it. Like it's terrifying. It's an insane storyline for a kid's game, but it had so much humor in it that you didn't realize what was going on. At the same time, I loved Chrono Trigger because it showed you that there's so many pathways that you can take. There's different ways that you can end that game. There's secrets and all kinds of things. And I like Secret of Mana because I loved the story and I loved dragons when I was a kid. In fact, that game showed me that you can have an emotional reaction to games, and it's because I really liked dragons growing up. I really thought they were super, I still do. Dragons are cool, but I thought they were super, super cool when I was a kid because I loved fantasy stuff, Dungeons and Dragons, things like that. And at the end of that game, your dragon turns out to be the boss of the game. And I was so upset that I thought I did the game wrong because I just played through Chrono Trigger, and so I knew there were multiple paths in games, so I thought there was in this. That I reset the game. Like I completely deleted my save file and started over from the beginning.
Huh. And what would you say is your favorite game and or games now?
Honestly, I'd have to say the same games. It hasn't really changed over all these years. I have games that I get into for a while, but none of them have that same impact as the first thing you ever did in gaming. It really set the tone for what I like in games. And over the years, like I still have experienced a ton of other games and found things that I like or dislike, certain concepts or maybe design options that I really enjoy. And I've really kind of just focused on what do I like to see in games and what do I not like to see in games, and then try to reflect that in what I'm building.
Okay. So just now realizing I typed up this question wrong, but when did you become interested in designing video games?
Right about the time that I got interested in games in the first place, I started making pen and paper games, I think the same year that I played the Super Nintendo. And I started working on Dungeons & Dragons dungeons. And it was great. Like I got to build my own worlds and test things and try stuff. And I realized then that I had a great passion for seeing people go through my stuff. It's actually why I'm so happy with Heartbound now, because I can go watch someone stream the game. I can see how they interact with things. And because there's so many secrets and pathways and little things all throughout the game, I can learn something from every single player who plays. And it actually helps me find bugs or make things better or, reaffirm my beliefs in certain types of design, like if it works exactly the way I wanted it to, all kinds of things like that. But yeah, that's around the time that I wanted to make.
Okay, then we can move on to the proper meat and taters of this. So, if you had a booth at PAX or a similar video game convention and someone was walking by, what would be the rundown you give them as to what Heartbound is?
Just giving them like the elevator pitch kind of thing.
Yeah.
Honestly, in general, what I tell them to do is play the demo. Like I can explain the storyline to you. I can explain the intricacies of what I'm trying to do with it. The best way to say it is it's about a boy and his dog, secrets, and sanity. And that's all I'll usually say. And I say, go play the demo. Demo's about an hour long. It's free. If you don't like it, that's fine. The demo is going to give you a really good idea of what I'm doing, because if I tell you how I'm setting up the story, if I tell you how I'm building all of those secrets into the game and things like that, it will change the way that person plays. And it's supposed to be something that they can evolve into naturally and they can discover naturally because it has that much more impact.
Okay, so where did the name Heartbound come from?
It was actually, we had a list when we first started working on the game of about 100 names, and they were all based on the storyline and things like that. And the original working title of Heartbound was actually Heartfall. And we ended up getting rid of it because Heartbound just felt better based on the story. It's funny now because people say like, oh, it's just an Earthbound thing. Like they just did an anagram. That actually wasn't intended at all. It has nothing to do with Earthbound, even though I love that game. It's just based on the storyline. And if you get halfway through the early access content, that becomes much more apparent.
Okay. So not too long ago, and by not too long ago I mean like the beginning of the week, I've known about this game for quite a fair bit due to don't want to mention names because this has already been brought up to death by people smarter than me, but a certain high-profile YouTuber mentioned this game, and it was brought to the attention that he didn't mention Heartbound in the way he should.
You're talking about the map pad thing. I totally understand. So the thing with that was, anytime that we get covered by someone in the media over the last year, almost 2 years, our game has been equated to Undertale. And it's not equated to Undertale because of good reasons. 99.9% of the time, we actually had an issue with Rock Paper Shotgun. We had to call them about it last time because one of their writers said that we took art, level designs, and storyline from Undertale and brought it into the game. None of those things were true, so they had to remove the article. It's been an ongoing problem. So to call out MapPad is no different from us calling out anyone else who is doing this in the past, because they're not doing it for us. They're not doing it to benefit us or our game. They're doing it for their own benefit. They're trying to expand the reach to a larger audience of people that like Undertale. But here's the problem. Since our game isn't Undertale and has no association with it, what you're doing is you're creating a bad situation for new indie devs, because now they're being judged based on a past game that has nothing to do with them. We're not a sequel to Undertale. We're not a fan game of Undertale. We have nothing to do with Undertale. So people who don't like Undertale immediately don't like us. And people who do like Undertale like us for the wrong reasons. And that's not a good place to be. So I called them out about it. And the problem with the general internet is that when you call someone out on the internet, if that person has enemies, they come out of the woodwork. And that's exactly what happened here. I didn't know if so many people didn't like MatPat. I had absolutely no idea about that situation at all, because I don't generally watch his stuff. Like, I don't know about all the drama related to his channel. And they came out of the woodwork, they attacked him, and they thought that they were defending us in the process. And 99% of what I had to deal with was either attacks on my person as a developer, attacks on our studio, or people trying to just attack MatPat and show me what a good job they did. And at the end of the day, I don't like any of that stuff. If you look at what our community has done on that video, there are hundreds of comments on there correcting his information, and no one from within our community attacking him. Because every time I saw one of our community members trying to attack him, I said, go delete that tweet. That's not what our community is about. Because it isn't. It has nothing to do with that. I wanted our information to be correct. I don't want to attack another content creator, even if he has 11 million subscribers. Like, I don't really care.
Mm-hmm. So, I'm glad you gave the total summary of that, because the information I got is a Gargle Mesh, because my Twitter is a Gargle Mesh and the social medias I have access to is a Gargle Mesh.
No, absolutely. That makes total sense. It was a rough time. Like, I actually ended up getting a lot of death threats from fans, and it was awful. It was awful to deal with, and it lasted about a month. I actually had an auto response basically set up for people who were watching YouTube videos and things, because a lot of people from YouTube tried to jump in and expand the drama to try and get more views, and they got a lot of the information wrong because they were trying to make it as dramatic as possible to get as many views as they could, and purposely got the information wrong to expand on the situation, and it just ended up being a problem. Like, it was just a big, awful problem.
Yeah.
So, I think at the end of the day, if you're covering a game, call it the game it is. That's it. That's all you should be doing if you're covering a game. And I cover games too. We have, I'm a partner on Twitch. I do YouTube videos of stuff, and we cover games all the time. Judge a game based on what it is, not what you think it should be.
Okay. And the other person I heard of this game from was Sarah Zedek, chief content creator of the YouTube channel Let's Talk About Stuff, when she got into a talk about how Game of the Year lists are a bit of nonsense, and she talked about the oodles and oodles of controversy surrounding the development time of Red Dead Redemption 2, and into that discussion she mentioned some other games that don't get a literal metric ton of coverage and support from one of the big companies, and one of the games she mentioned was yours, and I was like, oh my goodness.
I didn't even know she actually talked about it. That's funny.
If you look at her video as titled roughly like why Game of the Year lists are garbage, she talks about Heartbound among other indie games about halfway-ish through, just to talk about giving coverage to people who don't have the luxury of AAA resources.
Yeah, it's true. I actually like her point that Game of the Year lists are kind of garbage, because they don't generally reflect anything other than whatever subjective opinion it is of the person doing the video for that. So that makes a lot of sense. I don't know what she said about our game, and I hope it was good. But yeah, we don't have the luxury of a AAA company budget. We also don't have the luxury of any type of investor or publisher or anything like that. I did that specifically because I wanted to show that even though I left AAA, you can actually make indie games without having a budget for any of those types of things. To date, we have spent $0 on marketing. I have done all of it myself through social media, talking to people, doing things like this, running our stream, all of that stuff done manually by me without spending a single dollar on it. And I'm trying to show that as an indie studio, you can do those things and you don't have to act like a AAA. As long as you don't keep yourself a secret, like a lot of other indies do, you can succeed. And you can be, really successful inside of your space that way.
Yep. So yes, when she talked a bit about Heartbound, she said all good things about
That's cool.
this
I'll
adorable
watch the
boy
video.
going into magical adventures with the dog, and she also said, and this is, I just I just laughed because the magic of her editing can make a joke funny. Or she said, like, I guess you could say this game has a lot of heart bound. And
Oh,
cheesy jokes like that are just something I've been practically raised on.
yeah. I mean, I love a good pun, and it's why Heartbound has so many of them in it.
Yeah. So next, uh, so yeah, you while you haven't, uh, yeah, well, you said just to play the demo from the bits I've seen on the Steam page with the trailer and all of that. It's got a style sort of, but not quite similar to, as you've said before, Earthbound and Chrono Trigger, where it's, top, almost top down style, you're walking around and navigating an environment, sort of like old timey RPGs. And so, were the games like you've said, Earthbound, Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, did you, was making a game that plays the way Heartbound plays, was that just was were you thinking back on those games and thinking, I want to make a game that's similar to those games, but at the same time my own style? Or was it just like a subconscious thing as you were working on it?
I mean, absolutely. I wanted to make a game that was similar in those style. That's why I made the game that I did at this point is I wanted to make a game that reminded me of my old SNES day games. And it's tough to do because you have to do something different inside of the same space. So what I did instead was no random battles. I always thought that random battles in those games were actually like filler. They felt boring. Grinding through levels didn't feel like I was getting more powerful. And for some people it does. Some people it feels great. You're actually like leveling up. Your numbers are going up. But for me, it just felt like I was doing it to get my numbers up so I could beat the next boss, so I could find out the next piece of the story. And that's not really what I wanted to do here. So if you look at Heartbound, that doesn't ever happen. You never have to grind out levels and things like that. So I made it basically as much about the story as I possibly could while still having combat sequences and other things in it, but they're story driven. They're ones that are there to make the story, make sense or tell more stories. But yeah, definitely had roots in the old SNES titles, but I intentionally diverted away from them so that I could make something new and different.
And okay, so yeah, would you also say that the visual style of the game was inspired by those three games that you grew up with?
So, fun fact about that: Shay,
Oh,
our artist, has never actually played a Mother Series
oh,
game. Never,
huh.
never at all. The art style is completely based on what Shay thinks looks good, and my art direction saying what I think the environment should look like. Um, yeah, Shay has absolutely no influence from any of these games at all because he's never played them.
Okay. That's just what I thought when I was watching the trailer and looking at the screenshots, because I know many people who have grown up with those games, and I've known many people who have designed games in the spirit of those games.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah. So one of the big descriptive points in the Steam page is that it doesn't have, as you've mentioned a bit before, it doesn't have traditional RPG style gameplay with grinding enemies and XP and leveling up, and not in that way most people would expect from a more traditionally designed RPG. And you've mentioned that you don't find the grind that is common in a lot of RPGs particularly appealing.
Yeah, I don't like the grind in that. I also don't like consumable items. So think about a potion, right? A lot of times you'll just use potions as you find them in games, but some players, not everyone, myself included here, is we save stuff. Like the Horde, the special mega elixir that you get, right? And then never use it. Well, because that item doesn't get any use, you end up ending the game without ever using it at all. And that feels really bad to me. I never wanted that to be a situation where you're like, man, when should I use the Master Ball? When should I use this Mega Elixir? Should I save it for the boss fight? What if it's not the final phase of the boss fight? All those kind of things really bothered me. So the game also has no consumables whatsoever.
Okay, then. Yep, and as someone who knows literally nothing about any aspect of creating a game, whether it's the actual design or the art direction or the musics or anything else, what would you say were like some of the more challenging parts of creating Heartbound?
Some of the most challenging parts, honestly, learning everything. I came from AAA, where everything is handled by different teams. All of your marketing stuff is handled, legal stuff, financing stuff, everything is handled by these different teams of people that are hired specifically to do those things. I do that all by myself. That's all me. Like that's very very hard to learn alone. So I think that's probably one of the most hard things about making this game. Isn't actually making the game itself. It's doing all the things that go along with making a game. It's doing the things where you learn how to create a game beyond just building the game itself, running an indie studio. It's very different.
Okay, so since Heartbound is currently available on Steam, are there plans to bring it to any other online video game stores or consoles in the future?
Not currently. I wanted to bring it onto the Epic Store, but they haven't made anything public yet for people to do that kind of thing. The percentage on Epic Store is just better in a lot of ways. I also like to find out more about their platform before I really commit to that. But I'm always looking at that kind of stuff because as a small indie, even 5% of our sales income difference it's a pretty big deal. A whole bunch of copies, even if that's $1 per game, that ends up being a lot of money really fast, and that keeps us open and making more games. So I think that's a big thing for me is checking to see if these other platforms end up panning out as being competitors to Steam, or if Steam just still is the best answer.
Mm-hmm. All right then. And now time for the question that everyone always understands perfectly, and there's never been a single bit of confusion on it in the history of this podcast. And you can just take my word for it and not go back to any of the other episodes with other guests. In your opinion, Thor, is video games?
Is video games?
Yes.
Yes. Video games is yes.
Okay then. So, with that, this particular episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast has come to a close. I would like to thank Thor of Pirate Software for joining me today and talking about Heartbound. If any of the -7 people watching this are interested, it's currently on Steam. There's a free demo, and then just buy the game and then buy the soundtrack. Buy it as many times as you can without your computer exploding. Just buy it, is what I'm saying. And, yep. If any of the negative 12 people listening to this enjoyed it, feel free to like and subscribe. You can follow me on the Twitters at tgorman83 if you want. And before we go, Thor, is there anything you wish to promote or plug?
I mean, you can always check out our stuff on Twitch. We have a channel called Go Pirate Software. So if you go and check that out, I actually do daily dev streams, 10 hours long, and you can come talk about, making games. You can talk about any games that you want to make. You want to talk about how it is to make a game. You can talk about, what it's like in the current industry or in the world, all that kind of stuff. And we talk about it daily, 10 hours a day while I'm making Heartbound. So if you're interested in that, come hang and watch the stream. You can also watch Shay do art. Shay does art for the first 5 hours, and I do programming for the second 5 hours. We split it up. It starts at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time every single day, except for Wednesday. Wednesday is the only day, which is why we can do this today.
Okay. So, yes, this has been the Pumpkin Copter Cast. Thank you all for tuning in and listening to this. And before we sign off, as I always say, because this is the catchphrase I've always had, and you don't need to check on any of the other past videos. Have a gourd day. Bye.
That's ridiculous. See ya.